So welcome back. We'll kind of wrap up some of our final thoughts on Porter's five forces model. So we've talked about exactly all the little tools and techniques, and I mentioned very holistically that one of the uses of the five forces model is to determine whether a firm should enter a given industry or not. Now there's two kind of corollary uses that can be germane as well. Once a firm is already in a given industry, you can still use Porter's five forces. One use for it is to forecast future profitability. But you got to keep in mind that past profitability is a very poor indicator of future profitability. One of the reasons for this is what Karl Popper calls the Oedipus effect. Oedipus effect comes from Greek mythology. Oedipus was someone who got a prophecy that he found very disagreeable, and he did everything in his power to avoid fulfilling his prophecy. Same thing with Porter's five forces. Just the simple act of telling you what my analysis shows of current and past trends means that you would react to it to try to change the future to your liking or have a future of your liking, and it almost invalidates claims about the past. So for this reason, past profitability is a poor indicator of future profitability. Additionally, if you can manage to forecast certain changes in the industry structure, then you could also try to understand how these changes would impact competition and competitors, but also profitability of that given industry. Okay? So Porter's five forces can be used as a way to have a snapshot of the past and the future. I'll talk about that in just a second. And of course, you can also use Porter's five forces as a tool to kind of understand some strategies to improve industry profitability. So you can ask yourself what structural variables are in the industry that are currently depressing profitability. So for example, if there's too many competitors, that might be depressing profitability. If you've got a certain number of suppliers that are too powerful, that might be depressing profitability, right? And then of course you can ask the question, what about the current industry structure can be changed by individual firm-based strategies or collective or network-based strategies? So for example, if you're in an industry that has a lot of internal rivalry, so there's a lot of firms and they're all being leveraged by the same handful of suppliers, maybe you're better off going from a firm-level strategy to a network-level strategy. In other words, working with your competition to have larger buying orders, and that way you can leverage your suppliers somewhat, right? Now we talked about the different five forces: the threat of new entrants, bargaining power of suppliers, internal rivalry, threat of substitutes, and bargaining power of clients. What you can do is kind of make some sort of a subjective assessment based on the factors that would increase or decrease each of the potential five forces, and we would normally give that a score out of 5, right? So if we think that, and of course you can use whatever scale you want. If you think that the threat of substitutes is very high, you could give it a 5 out of 5. Or if you think that the threat of substitutes is very low, you give that a 1 out of 5. Some people also use 0. It's up to you, right? Just be consistent in your scale. So what you can use five forces model to do is you can say current trends or current threats based on substitutes are like a 1 out of 5, but in the future we think it'll be a 2 out of 5. And you can do that for each of the 5 forces, and you generate what you call your LRP picture. That's long-range planning. And long-range planning would have a present value and a future value. Some people also do past, present, future. It doesn't really matter. Do whatever the boss tells you to do. But you'd have a present and a future value. And that would also, as I mentioned, would be out of 5, and it would be the average of the scores of the other 5 forces. And so they can say, well, right now we believe that we should or should not enter this industry, but in the future we can say that we should or should not enter this given industry. And that's what the LRP would tell you. So it's kind of an aggregation of the different 5 forces. So, a couple other final notes. When you're using the 5 forces, it's very important to identify which level and unit of analysis you're describing. And again, as I mentioned, competition occurs at the local level. So different subsets of an industry may have very different 5 forces analyses. So let's talk about like shipping, for example, right? Well, to use the word shipping for an industry can be very vague. Are you talking about like maritime shipping, using big boats? Are you talking about trucking? Are you talking about air freight? They would all have their own five forces analysis. Okay? You also have to look at who are the key suppliers within each kind of subset of the industry. They would have, of course, different key and indirect clients. There'd be different rivals. There'd be different substitutes at each level of analysis. Okay? That's an important thing to note. So, hope you've enjoyed this module. We will continue our discussion with throughout this entire course on strategy. Looking forward to discussing things like how you generate competitive advantage. We'll talk a little bit more about how to use segmentation to generate strategic group maps, all the way until we finally get to strategies practice. So I hope you've enjoyed this particular module in the strategy course, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.